Good evening. Welcome to all of you to tonight's President's Entrepreneurship Lecture. Today there's a common misconception that entrepreneurship is only focused on for-profit pursuits. And when we embrace that view, we miss the opportunity to apply innovative thinking to not-for-profit endeavors. The career of tonight's guest lecture makes a compelling case that visionary thinking is not isolated to the world of finance, and that we can find solutions to our world's most complex and challenging problems in the nonprofit world using the lessons of entrepreneurship. Kathy Giusti is a world-renowned leader in cancer research and a champion for open access, data-driven models to accelerate cures. She is the founder of the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation and also serves as faculty co-chair of the Harvard Business School Kraft Precision Medicine Accelerator. Please join me in welcoming visionary and entrepreneur Kathy Giusti.
Good evening. I'm so happy to be here with all of you and excited to be able to share my story. The focus that I'm going to have tonight is, as you can tell from the film, about science, technology, and what's going on in that space, and why I truly believe that your time is now. No matter what business we're looking at, the opportunities for business and entrepreneurship are crazy. And I want you to be able to take advantage of all of them. So I talked with a number of students and some faculty members, and I really appreciated their time, and we agreed that probably the best thing I could cover with you would be one path, which is my own path, of how I got from a life science major to where I am today, and then be able to walk you through what are we seeing going on in the world as we see it today, and then what does that mean for each of you as you try to pick your path moving forward and your passion, what you're truly interested in. So as I start with my own path, I want you to know it was certainly not linear. But the one thing I want you to take away from it is that as long as your path is allowing you to generate new skills, it's okay. It's all good. So I, like many of you, do we have any pre-med majors in the room here or science majors? Just a couple. Okay. So I was a pre-med major in undergraduate school and was enrolled in medical school. And unexpectedly, my father, who was a physician, said to me, I don't think that's the best idea for you. I think you should go and look at other options in healthcare, and you've had too much tunnel vision. So I deferred medical school for a year and went to work in sales for Merck, a major pharmaceutical company. Best move I ever made in my life. And I know we're all thinking, I don't want to do sales, but I can promise you, learning sales for 1.5 years of my life, it teaches you not just how to sell a product, but how to sell your ideas. I moved from sales then into headquarters to go into marketing at Merck and realized then that I had this amazing interaction with the people that were in finance and production, and it really gave me a great perspective on the business side. And then I realized I wanted to stay there and went on to Harvard Business School instead of going to medical school. While at Harvard Business School, and by the way, I think that combination is also something I love, where you have a technology degree undergrad and then you eventually get your experience and then move out to get the MBA. That combination of high science with an MBA was great, although I will tell you, I think I was the only person at Harvard Business School that had never taken a business class. I was a little overwhelmed the first year. But then I realized how much I really liked consumer marketing and took another tide over to the Gillette company to learn advertising, product placement, promotion, and then realized I missed healthcare and went back to Searle, but at this point did worldwide operations and all international because I hadn't yet gotten that experience. And the reason I share that with you is because in order to be an entrepreneur, you really do want to make sure you're learning as many skills as you possibly can to keep building them out. And by the time I got to Searle, my skill sets were strong enough that now I was on the fast track. I was working with the board. I was on the executive team. And I have to tell you, everything was flying high. I was loving every single thing I did until my doctor called at the age of 37. I remember I was heading down the Kennedy Turnpike, heading home from work. It was about 8 o'clock at night. And he said, Kathy, I'm really sorry, but those blood tests that you had on your routine physical, they came back and they don't look good. And of course, I'm a doctor's daughter. I'm pushing him on the phone saying, well, what's wrong? Something's wrong. And he finally said, it's cancer. And I remember thinking to myself, there was no internet back then, if you can imagine. I know that's really hard to imagine, but there was none. It was 8 o'clock at night. I had to wait until the next morning get up early, go to Borders bookstore, and I am on the floor with Harrison's Internal Medicine in front of me, leafing through it, and all I see is 100% fatal, 3 years to live at best. And as a pharmaceutical executive, I'm scouring the pipeline. There's nothing, absolutely not a single drug in this pipeline. There is zero hope. So I ask you, you're in your 30s and in the height of your career, and somebody tells you you're going to die in 3 years. What would you do? Would you pull the covers up over your head, or might you travel the world? It's really hard to think about, right? But for me, I became a reluctant entrepreneur. And the reason is we had a little 1-year-old girl at home. And for every morning I woke up wondering what the heck I was going to do with my life. Her smile lit my life up, and I said, somebody has to do something. And I decided it was going to be me. And fortunately, I did have the skill sets to get started. I started the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation by looking at the entire nonprofit sector. And as Allison said, I was shocked at what I saw. 90% of nonprofits didn't raise $1 million. 90%. I don't know what you do with a less than $1 million. And most of them were doing psychosocial work, which was great, but I really wanted to help extend life and find cures. I was determined that if I just lived a little longer, our daughter Nicole just might remember me, remember she had a mom, and that was my whole goal for starting the MMRF. Along with disrupting the entire nonprofit sector, as a cancer patient, though, now I'm watching the medical system in cancer research, and I'm horrified, because I realized I could count the number of scientists working on multiple myeloma in one hand. And the reason was there's no money. And if there's no money, there's no grants. If there's no grants, the scientists won't come. So we had to solve that problem by raising the dollars. Even after I started giving them grants, they just didn't collaborate. You know, they were often working in silos. So we had to build collaborative models like you saw in the video with tissue banks and things like that to get them to work together. Pharmaceutical companies didn't want to come because it was such a small, uncommon disease. So I started a second company called the Consortium, which was a clinical network. Now it's 20 different academic centers strong, and we have conducted 70 trials of 30 different cancer drugs. And in today's world, I'm probably the biggest advocate saying it's not fair if cancer patients' data is housed in academic centers or in pharmaceutical companies and not out in the public domain where it can be aggregated, even crowdsourced, and driven to the clinic so that we can find cures so much faster. So we're changing that entire model as well. So complete disruption of the nonprofit sector, and then complete disruption of the cancer section, and now these were the results. It usually takes 10 years to get one drug to market. And in the last 10 years, we've had 10 drugs approved in multiple myeloma, which are used in many other cancers as well. We've increased the 5-year survival, and now patients don't have to say that very sad, I'll live 3 years, but they're living on average 9 or 10 years. And in oncology, that is so unheard of, to change the entire mindset of the patients that you're serving. And then it wasn't really a surprise when, after having done this for a certain period of time, Robert and Jonathan Kraft, and you all know them because they own the New England Patriots, gave an endowment to Harvard Business School to focus on how can business incentives and models actually drive science and technology forward. So the dean gave me a call and asked me if I would come up and work for Robert and Jonathan strictly in this area of business and science. And so I took that position and now work with both of them, which has been an absolute treat for me. Their interest in this field comes from the heart. Robert lost his wife Myra to ovarian cancer. They had sequenced her genome and they couldn't find a drug for her, and he really wanted to change all of that. So they're demanding, but it has been a true gift for me because the expectation is for me to take everything I learned in the model we developed for myeloma and now extend it and share best practices across every cancer out there. And so this joy of waking up every day in my job and knowing that I'm doing something I love, I have found my passion, I'm happy on Monday mornings when I have to get up and go to work, but more importantly that, you know, we're saving lives and changing lives and giving hope to, honestly, hundreds of thousands of patients every day is the kind of passion I want all of you to have in your jobs too. And I know you can, and this is why. I know the healthcare sector, but the entire country is just exploding with opportunity right now. If you look at science, genomic sequencing can now be done for $1,000. Anybody can get their genome sequenced. In addition, everything in immunotherapy is taking off, and all data is digital and placed in the cloud. And you all know what that means. When data becomes accessible, it means that the whole world can have it, which means we see more apps and more entrepreneurship and lots of business opportunities. So to just give you a sense of how this grows, and when I speak at various schools and work with different students in different majors, I always show them, if you're a science major like I was, you may be saying, I want to go to medical school. Or you may say, I want to work in a lab and get a PhD and go to Sloan Kettering or MD Anderson. You may say, I want to work with Eric Lander at the Broad Institute. Or you might go to the pharma or biotech side. And if you're more on the engineering, computer science side, it's still exploding because all the data has to go somewhere. So it's Salesforce, it's Oracle. Electronic health records have to be done in every hospital today, and they have to be interconnected. So the entire field is exploding. And then once data gets out there and it needs to be analyzed, its crowd goes to the crowd, and all of the math majors and groups like this can go over to IBM Watson, Topcoder, Sage Bionetworks, and groups like that. But it doesn't really stop there. So I always try to explain to students that you don't have to be a science major to work in the healthcare sector. The truth is, you can look at the economic side and the value side, and right now it's become increasingly important, so the jobs end up being over at Aetna or United and Optum or Intermountain Health. But if you're more on the communication side, you may end up on digital health, where lots of opportunities are opening there. And then I always work with students to say, if you actually don't know, and you're not really sure, it's not a bad move to go over to the consulting side where you're working with many different clients, or the advertising and PR side where the exact same thing happens. It gives you a few years to figure out what is it that you really want to do, what kind of companies do you find interesting, and yet it's still a great skill set and resume builder. And then I always like when I'm talking with different schools, especially liberal arts, because I think one of the hardest things to do is to take all this complex information and make it visual and understandable. And I usually find that people that have backgrounds at schools like this do very well because they know how to work cross-functional teams. So an example is 23andMe to the left, which is a genomic sequencing company that had to make it fun and interesting, and they have done that by making it very visual. The colors are always bright, the ads are always interesting, and they have now built one of the largest data sets in the country today. And it's because they've done a really good job of integrating the scientific team along with the communications teams. So no matter what happens when you are a student and you're trying to figure out where do you want to go, I always remind everybody to forge your own path and look for the trends first, and then find your passion, and then forge where you want to go. And when I say that, I always explain to everybody, you have to look where the growth trends really are. I mean, if an area is exploding and you're looking for an opportunity, you definitely want to go to that space. But also look at the areas that are interesting you the most. And you all live on social. It's more like, where is that time being spent? And then it's also making sure you understand which companies are in that space. So you have to spend enough time doing the research in there. And I have to be honest with you, I always live on companies like Fast Company, Wired, Inc., because they tend to be more on the entrepreneurial side and open a tremendous amount of doors. And then always go back and make sure you're identifying who the leaders are in that space, that you're educating yourself before you go to meet them. And the reason I say this to you is it's easy to find the lists of who the best people are. It's also easy for you to see where they're speaking. And I promise you, when you actually reach out to people, if you just connect with them on LinkedIn, which people do this with me all the time, I'm not going to notice because it's happening so many times during the day. But if you actually reach out to me and say, I go to Lafayette, I know different people that you've met, I heard you speak, or I went online and actually saw you speak, and you write that way, I'm much more likely to know what you're doing. If you actually then move in and you join me on Twitter and you're retweeting, I'm just going to start to notice you. And I'm also going to start looking at your brand. So it's really important that as you start to do this, I'm always amazed when I work with different students, they're nervous that they're stalking and they're going to get caught stalking, and somebody's going to see them there, and you shouldn't. Like, for many of us, it's okay. We actually want you to go into our LinkedIn and pay attention to who's in there with me, right? Who actually kind of blessed all of my skill sets, and who else looks at people like me? And then tell me you know me, and then I will reach back out and provide support. But you have to do it in a thoughtful way that gives me a hint that you've actually done just a little bit of research in that space. So I always say to everybody, this is one of your best places. I know a lot of people will go to the job boards and things like this, but I have to tell you, the world is out there, and it's such a huge opportunity for each and every one of you. I also will say that even sitting at Lafayette and seeing where all the parents are and different networks there, huge opportunities. You have all of your own networks, but make sure you're taking advantage of all those opportunities. When you actually start doing the interview process, though, one thing I always remind everybody is it's not just the company you're working for, it's who you're working with. Some people will bring you under their tent and say, I'm going to help you become as strong as you possibly can. An example for me was Scott Santarella. He was my first employee ever at the MMRF. He's now the CEO of a Lyme organization. But, in 10 years, he never went back and got his MBA and ended up becoming a CEO and had great experience because he was a great employee, and whatever he needed to learn, we made sure he got those skill sets. And I think that's the important piece for you, too. And as you move to the entrepreneurial side, and I know many of us want to run our own business, I will tell you there's nothing better than running your own business and waking up every day and also knowing you've made a huge difference with it. These are two of my favorite entrepreneurs, Kevin Plank at Under Armour and Ann Wojcicki at 23andMe. I like them because one's an athlete, and Ann Wojcicki at 23andMe was a physics major. And they both found their passion, and they both ended up, you have to learn to fail, you have to overcome adversity. This is why I think a lot of athletes and academics can do really well together. We do this in our company. We literally screen for a lot of our PhDs that work with us, because we look like a virtual biotech at the MMRF, are going to work a certain way. But we often look for different types of people, like athletes, to come in and work with them because they bring out the team culture that we definitely really, really want. And they're often used to dealing with the adversity that we're looking for. So having that blend in any kind of an entrepreneurial company, for us, is a huge gift. And we literally try to balance the team that we have in the companies that I work with. And so I think that is one of the greatest gifts. And when you reach this point of saying, I'm working at a company, I'm making a huge difference, and I actually feel like I've reached this level of professional success, there is no better feeling. Except, I'm going to share with you that professional success means absolutely nothing without your personal happiness. And so I started tonight by telling you that my inspiration for starting the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation was our daughter Nicole was 1 year old when I was diagnosed. And the truth was, they found my cancer when we were trying to have another child. And I had to make the decision of, am I going to live like I'm going to live, or am I going to live like I'm going to die? And I made the decision to do the former. And our son David was born 14 months after my diagnosis. And I can look at all of you and know people thought I was crazy. They thought it was a bold decision. But I have never had a sad day since. Partly because he's hysterically funny, but also because I knew that he and Nicole always had each other. And that was the greatest gift that ever could have been given to me. And so when you actually make the decisions in your life about your professional success, I'm also going to say the ones on your personal happiness are equally as important. My husband, Paul, has stood steadfast beside me for 25 years through my entire diagnosis with cancer. And I can promise you, I still go to Dana-Farber every 2 months and wait for my test results to come in. My disease is still 100% fatal. And in that window, when I'm waiting for those test results to come back, I don't think to myself, did I win another award or did I speak somewhere else? I think to myself, I wonder how the next game's going to go. I wonder when they're going to graduate. I wonder what their job's going to be. And those are the most important moments for you to take advantage of. And there is not a single moment that has happened in my life that I've ever taken for granted, whether it was the crazy moment of David convincing me to go skydiving in South Africa with his sister. but more importantly, the quiet moments where you actually watch your children achieve their own dreams of stepping on a baseball field for the first time when that's what they wanted to do since they were 12 years old. So I hope that I've given you the perspective that life is all about balance, and I want you to be passionate, and I want you to be incredibly successful professionally. But I actually kept a journal from the day I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, and I kept one for every year I never, ever expected to live. And now all 20 journals sit on my desk. And just recently, I went back and I read them, cover to cover, end to end, all of them. And I can tell you that your life is never going to feel in balance. Every day, every week, every month I read those journals, I never felt like I was making the right decision. But now, all these years later, reading it all together, I don't have one regret. Not one regret of how I managed my life. So just remember, it's not a sprint. It truly is a marathon. And no matter what you're doing, looking for your job or deciding what you're going to do in your personal life, it's all going to be fine. Take a deep breath and know that if adversity hits you, it's okay, because odds are it's going to make you do something even better, even more compelling, and you're going to learn so much from it. I know that you have a great reputation as millennials. I am so impressed everywhere I go. You are smart, you are tech savvy, you really do want to give back, and if there is ever anything that we can all do to make your lives better, easier, more productive, and happier, I want you to know we're here to do that. Thank you for your time.